Next slide. A couple of housekeeping rules. Just some of the basics. If you've been with us, you've heard this once, if not 1,000 times. We definitely want your participation, but if you've got a lot of background noise, just mute yourself, and then there'll be opportunities where we'll ask questions, or there'll be opportunity to collaborate, and then you can unmute, we can talk, or if you just want to raise your hand, and we can call on you. That's how we can handle that. And you can also enter into chat, and our lovely steering committee will be monitoring the chat, and we'll make sure that we raise your question forward. Not too many people do this anymore, but if you do join us by phone, just don't place us on hold. A lot of your university phone services have that music in the background, and while Christina's presentation is awesome, it does not need a musical bed in the background. So we'll appreciate you guys paying attention to that. Reminder to deactivate any AI note-taking apps. It's our best way to handle any policies that are across universities. So we want to make sure that that's not engaged in recording every little word we say, or at least transcribing it. And as a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be posted onto YouTube, our project management community group channel, usually the Friday following this meeting. So that's our housekeeping notes for the day. Our hosts is the Project Management Community Group Steering Committee and their co-chairs. I think in the steering committee, we've got Carol here, Christina's here, Jen's here, may have to leave early. I'm, of course, here, and Alex popped in, but I think he left. I think that's most of our committee. I'm scanning the participant panel right now. Oh, and John. I always forget about John. Definitely, John, our steering committee emeritus, I guess that's what we call him these days. So then today's agenda is our main presentation on team wellness. And we've got a couple of announcements at the end, some resources that I want to make people aware of. So you want to stick around for that. This session that Christina's about to give is part of the Getting PM Fit series. It's about a 3-part series where we look at some very basics of things that we can do, little things we can do to become better project managers. It's all inspired by this quote that has certainly inspired me this year. It's small choices add up, and small choices carry us into larger goodness, by K.J. Ramsey. Interesting author if you want to look her up. And that should take us over to the team wellness presentation. So Christina, I'm going to stop my share so that you can share your share. And you are muted, just so you know.
Yeah, there we go. I figured out how to do it when I hit share there. Another thing popped up, but let me pick the layout. So
Awesome.
there we go. So does it look okay? Good?
Looks great, and we hear you loud and clear. So both things check out.
Awesome. All right. So like Ed was saying, we were planning the sessions for this year, and it was around, we were getting ready for New Year's, and we started thinking about, well, when we get close to New Year's and we think about our New Year's resolutions and the things we want to do to be healthier or in better shape, but applying that to project management, and if there's a new methodology or something that you wanted to use, or a new tool or activity that you wanted to incorporate, how do you make these improvements and sustain them throughout a project? Today, we will be talking about team wellness and how we can foster well-being. We'll discuss how this works in your role as the leader for the team, the example that you're setting for the team, what you can do and how to accomplish these things. So feel free to jump in and share any experiences you have, any stories, positive or negative, things that have worked well, things that haven't worked well, because we're all here to learn and support each other. So I would greatly appreciate you all lending your expertise as well. So PMI identified the following skills that are important for a project manager to have: leadership and adaptability, organization and time management, which was Jen's topic last month. So thanks to her for that awesome presentation on time management. Being a creative at problem solving, effective communication, and motivation and team management. And then some of our responsibilities as a project manager are to set the tone for how the project's going to run. So being the expert on the different members of the team, who's involved and why, what their role is, what level their involvement is going to be. You want to make sure that you understand who is the team so that you can communicate that effectively to everybody else on the team or to the people that you're presenting the project to, things like that. And then managing expectations. What should everyone expect in terms of workload? What project priorities are and where those fall in relation to their other work duties. And then, managing expectations, making sure everyone's aware of what the project goals are, what the deadlines are, and then being the example. And I have a funny story to go along with that. So my daughter asked me the other day, she's 6. She goes, "Mom, I think this kid in my class is saying a bad word." And I was like, well, what is it? And she's like, "I don't want to say it." I was like, well, she goes, "I'll spell it." So she starts writing it out and she spells it HIPPOCRIT. It took me a second. I was like, "Oh, hypocrite." She's like, "What's a hypocrite?" So we don't want to be a hypocrite as a project manager. So if we're trying to promote well-being and understanding and making sure that people aren't, expected to work outside of work hours, things like that, we shouldn't be doing it either, right? So we don't want to be a hypocrite. So we want to practice what we're preaching. And let's talk about what this looks like when you are managing your project team. So we want to create a supportive environment, encourage work-life balance, foster transparency and communication, enhance connection and collaboration, and promote personal growth. So these are some things that we can do as the project manager during the project. Let's talk a little bit more about work-life balance. Setting the expectations for when people should be communicating or what the expectations are. If people have flexible schedules and they're working at different times, just setting the expectation that you shouldn't have to feel like you need to respond outside of work hours. Making sure that you have realistic deadlines. So talk to the project team members and discuss with them what their other work duties are, how long they think it'll take to accomplish certain tasks, so that you can really set those deadlines appropriately. You can do things like have walking meetings or find different ways to incorporate movement in your meetings. See like where can that fit in. It really helps people kind of stay awake, stay focused, maybe fosters even creativity. And then allowing time between meetings. I like to make sure my meetings aren't always starting like on the hour or they're not lasting like a full either 30 minutes or an hour, depending. Try to shorten it so people can have a little bit of time between meetings, especially now most stuff is virtual. And then making sure that people feel like they are able to take the time off when they need to or when they want to. Everybody needs a break to recharge, to rest, and come back feeling their full self. So creating that supportive environment, get to know your team members, not just what their role is in the project, but get to know more about them. And again, their responsibilities outside of the project, the other work that they're doing, maybe other projects they're involved in. Learn about the way that the team members like to work. So how do people like to communicate? And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can find out some of that information, but are they somebody who likes to just communicate via chat? Do they prefer a call? Things like that. Making sure that you are organizing team gatherings either in person or virtually whenever you can. Finding out what works best for your team, but giving them the opportunity to socialize with each other a little bit more. Celebrating project milestones and contributions. It's really easy to just say, okay, check, we finished this goal, let's go on to the next. But take that time to really celebrate those achievements and to thank the people on their project team for the work that they've been doing, help them feel that fulfillment. And then when you are engaging with leadership, often you're the liaison between the project team and university leadership or the department leadership. So making sure that your project team feels like you are their voice, right? That they can trust you to effectively communicate the project goals, their vision for how they plan on carrying things out, and any concerns that they have, that they trust you to communicate that effectively to the project or to the leadership. so that everybody can continue to move forward and make progress. All right, and then transparency and communication, providing time for regular updates and opportunities for regular interaction, um, both as a team and one-on-ones, just to check in on people and make sure that everybody's on the same page. Having clear channels of communication. So again, making sure that you have a team space maybe where you have communication or a project board, or a team chat. And so everybody knows where they need to go to talk to the project team. And the most effective way to reach people urgently if they need to, that they know how to do things like at mention, either individuals or the team as a whole, to make sure that if there is something urgent, that everybody's seeing it. So making sure you've discussed thoroughly with the team what those expectations are for where that communication is going to take place. Make sure you're using tools that everybody can access and everybody's familiar with. If you are using something new, make sure that you're taking that time to help people get to know what that tool is, how it works. And then make sure that you explain where to find documents, project documents, how folders are labeled, how documents are labeled. I know there's many times I've heard throughout projects, I don't know where that file was. I didn't know where it lived, or I didn't know where to find that information. So, always making sure to explain, even maybe when you're in a meeting, going through the process of saying, I'm going to this folder in this location, and I'm going to open this file so that they can see the whole process and they are familiar with where things are. And again, making sure everything is clearly defined, that everybody knows why certain people are in the project, what their roles are, what their expectations are, so that everybody, nobody's asking, well, why is that person here? Everybody knows what everybody's supposed to be doing and what they're responsible for. Connection and communication, making sure that we're encouraging team building activities. I'll show you a few that I've used before in a few moments, and then help everyone feel valued. Again, encourage regular feedback and active listening, make sure that you're also getting feedback from the team, maybe about how you're running the project, and show them that you're open to that feedback, you're open to growing. You want to make it the best experience for the project team. And by demonstrating that you're open to that feedback and you're being adaptable, then, hopefully that carries through the rest of the team as well, that you can provide feedback and say, hey, you're doing a great job, but here's something that we could do, to make it even better. And then making sure that interactions with the project team are maintaining civility. I know things can sometimes get heated in these projects. People are very passionate. So making sure that we're working toward bringing everybody back down to a tone and a discussion that is productive. Easier said than done, but there's a lot of resources that are helpful. There's a book called, I have it right next to my desk right here, Crucial Conversations. So learning some of those tactics that can help bring everybody back down to a better place to be more productive. And then making sure that everybody's given the ability to contribute. So a lot of times we'll have people who are very outspoken and who like to talk a lot, and then people who aren't as willing to step up. Their voice isn't always heard. So finding ways where you can give everybody the opportunity to contribute, and whether it's verbally or non-verbally, just saying, hey, if everybody can take a few minutes and then, write down 3 things that you'd like to, see done, or what you think we can do to accomplish this next goal. That makes it so that everybody has to do it, right? Everybody can contribute. So just thinking of ways where you can get the people who aren't speaking as often heard and involved. And lastly, we have personal growth. So I think it's really important in a project to start off strong by talking to the project team members about, what are their professional goals and how do they relate to the project. So if there's ways where if somebody wants to obtain a certain certification and it's related to the work they're doing on the project, what opportunities are there for them to do training, to maybe do a course or something and achieve that during the project? Does somebody want to give a presentation related to the project? Maybe, submit to speak at a conference. things like this where we're participating in a community group and they could give a presentation there. And just helping the team members be more involved in goal setting for the projects, give them constructive feedback. So right, check in with them throughout the duration of the project to see if they are meeting these goals for their personal professional growth, and seeing where you can give them opportunities for leadership throughout the project. So just thinking of that and thinking of each team member and how can we help foster that. So now we've talked about what we can do. Let's talk a little bit more about how we can do it. We're going to talk about, starting strong. What can you do from the very beginning in a project? And then how do you maintain it through the duration of the project? And we'll talk a little bit about interpersonal communication and what that role that plays in maintaining well-being. So starting strong, there are a few things that I like to incorporate. One thing that I've used in the very beginning is a survey. So I find out a little bit more about personal preferences and past experiences and expectations. So I started off a project with a survey where I asked, how do you prefer to do the following outside of regular meeting times? And it was things like, get an update or ask a question. It was really just communication based. Like, what are the different ways that you prefer to communicate outside of meetings? And then what do you anticipate your workload to look, what do you expect your workload to look like during this project? What tasks do you anticipate being responsible for? And how much time do you expect to devote each week? So putting it back onto the project team member to ask them what their expectations were, how they saw things unfolding. Is there something about the project that is exciting to you? So if there's a specific goal or task, or if they're excited to work with somebody specifically, I asked them about what they're excited about, if they had any questions or concerns going into the project, what they like and also what they hate about working on projects, and then what helps them work more efficiently during a project. And then I asked if there was anything that they would like their peers to know about their communication preferences. Again, if they prefer you to chat before you call them, like a heads up, like, hey, I'm going to call you. Or, how they prefer to talk with their peers outside of meetings, or just in general, what others should know about them. And then if there were any expectations or requests for the project manager. So what did they expect of me during the project? So surveys I found were really helpful, and also a way to get people to respond to certain things before going into a meeting as well, so that I could start off stronger in the meeting. Activities, so using things like attendance or a kickoff activity to get kind of people moving in the document or whatever I was using. I would have, people either write in that they're attending that day, or just have them do something in the document to help get people more engaged. And then making sure that if there was anything important we were talking about, that I'm asking that ahead of time before we're going to the meeting. I like to start off by sharing my philosophy, what I'm coming into the project with, my experience, the tools that I like to use, what my preferences are and my goals, and then laying the groundwork. I like to create working agreements and then discuss, again, the tools that I'll be using, everyone's roles and responsibilities, what the timeline that we're envisioning is, and the deliverables, and again, expectations for civility. And then this is a slide I used in a presentation I gave last year. And I really like this layout especially when you're getting started and it's like either a one-off or the first time you're coming together with a project team, but going over what the objective for the session is, how I expect people to participate during the session. If there is something that's new, giving people the time to test out the features, especially the ones that they're most likely to need to use during the meeting. And then just reminding everybody to, come into this with an open mind before you start judging or forming an opinion about something. Be curious, start asking questions before you formulate your opinion. That's my Ted Lasso reference there. And then during the project, it's important to maintain those regular check-ins. retrospectives are really helpful, especially as you're moving from one phase of the project to the next, or maybe you just have them as a set number of, said, okay, after this, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, how did we do during this time? What can we do better? What was a barrier? And taking that time to really think about the work that you've been doing instead of just plugging into the next thing. Making sure you're available, things come up all the time, questions, crisis. So making sure that the project team feels like they can always reach out to you when they need you. Again, that you're showing that you've used their feedback to adapt. And then you're having regular team building activities and then building in those well-being tactics, and you're carrying that consistently through. So here is an activity that I used. It was a radar activity. I gave everyone a survey before the meeting. How do you feel about how the team's done in these specific areas? So the light green was really good and the red was not so good. And so then we used this to look at where everyone kind of fell. It was anonymous. Nobody knew who said what. But it let us look at this and then talk about each area more and figure out ways to make improvements. And then, in one area, the stakeholder engagement, somebody thought we were doing a great job and somebody thought we were doing a terrible job. So then, looking at how everybody thinks things are going, this kind of helps foster that communication. It was really great. Another thing we did is we said, well, what could we be proud of in this phase? So everybody put in, what they thought that the project team should be proud of that we accomplished. There was another part to this too, where people gave each other kudos, and it was like, who do you want to say thank you to? And so people would write down on a sticky note who they wanted to thank and why. And so that was just a really nice way for everybody to feel valued and to talk about everyone's contributions in a very positive way. Another thing we've done is temp checks. So, how do you feel we've done in the following areas up to this point? So people were able to give feedback. Again, this was anonymous, so people could say how they felt about how we were doing in certain areas. And then another temp check we did, how confident you are in the knowledge of the project status, materials, and communication. So I know what my roles and responsibilities are. I know what others' roles and responsibilities are. I know where to find documents. This was just a great way to kind of check in and see people's comfort level with everything. Project meetings are a good use of my time. A lot of somewhats there. So how do we improve meetings? What can we do better? So it was really great feedback that we could take, not just, you don't want to wait all the way to the end of the project and say, well, I'm going to apply this to the next project. We're doing this throughout so we can make the project more successful. Now let's talk about interpersonal communication. So talking about how we communicate with one another, both verbally and non-verbally. These slides are from a presentation I did about a year and a half ago. Specifically looking at how we work together using collaborative tools, as it was interpersonal communication in a virtual world. So a lot of us are either hybrid or fully remote. So how do we continue to have those meaningful interactions using the technology? All right, so I got my master's in communication, and then I taught for several years. I taught interpersonal communication and public speaking. And I'd always tell my students, communication is never something that you're going to perfect. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. And project management, it's the same mindset, right? So it's always important to be thinking about how can I be a better project manager? How can I communicate more effectively? What will make my team better? So some aspects of interpersonal communication. You want to think about the content of what you're communicating. Is it useful, right? So is this something that will help the team? How factual and informative is what I'm telling them. I want to be approachable. So I want to make sure that there's room for collaboration, that there's room for people's thoughts and feelings, and that people feel like it's a safe place to communicate, that my communication is meaningful. So, what's the value of the message that I'm bringing? Emotional intelligence, so making sure that we are aware of others' emotions and how to handle those interpersonal relationships with empathy. And then verbal and nonverbal. So, sometimes we'll have our video on, sometimes we'll have our video off. So what is the image that we're portraying, right? So making sure that we're using nonverbal and verbal cues effectively, and thinking about like the timing of the message, the context of the message, all of that. And then this, when you work on your interpersonal communication, it can be a superpower. So, right, it's the difference between being a villain or a superhero, like how well we communicate. So just making sure, there's my Loki reference. So he can be a villain or he can be a hero. And then working agreements are a great way to start off strong. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but making sure that you have a clear understanding of what different terms in the project mean, right? So shared meanings and definition. What does ready mean? What does done mean? And then making sure that you're applying that in a consistent manner during the project. Setting expectations, so being upfront, again, about what you expect from the team members and from the project. If you do expect people to share their video during certain meetings or every meeting or, things like that, you want to make sure that you are explaining that upfront and your reasoning why. Thinking about the length of your meetings, how frequent they are. Are you meeting for an hour every week, or more or less, whatever it is, might depend on the type of meeting, right? So if you're having quick check-ins, and then longer working meetings, things like that, just really think about how the timing fits the purpose of the meeting. And then asking your colleagues like constantly, like what is working for them, what their preferences are, what drives them crazy, and if there's anything significant to be aware of, and then conducting those regular temp checks and reviews. So one of the things I also shared with the session that I did was some tips for all of the different tools that we may be using, whether it's a project or whatever you're working on. But you want to make sure you're using university licensed accounts. That people are, that helps make sure everybody's able to access the tools, right? And they're familiar with them. That you're making sure your profile and your presence and pronouns, things like that, are all updated and visible for people so that they know when you're available or not. And things like if my presence is green, feel free to call me, things like that, making sure everyone knows how to find you and what your availability is. Security and accessibility, making sure that your project team is aware of the different policies around retention and maybe sensitive data, things like what all of that is, so that as you have project documents, that you know how to store them appropriately and what the expectations are for those documents. And promoting well-being and empathy. So again, trying to have some of those like meetings with movement incorporated, being considerate of others' perspectives and circumstances. What's in a name, making sure that naming meetings, emails, files are all clear, memorable, and appropriate. Practice makes perfect. So if you are using new tools, making sure that you're giving people the time to get familiar with those. And then, let's go on to hosting your meetings. This is something I used for just hosting web conferences in general, but I think it's appropriate here, making sure that as you're going into meetings, either whether it's your project team or you're presenting, that you're setting the expectations. What should the audience expect from you? What do you expect from them? If it's something new, again, give a quick tour, let the audience practice. Booking meetings in a way that allows time between meetings, making sure you or whoever needs to be sharing is familiar with how to do it, and then making sure you're choosing the right tool. So you want to use a tool that people are familiar with, whether it's, a lot of our faculty will use Zoom, a lot of our staff will use Teams. So making sure you're thinking about, who's joining when you're scheduling a meeting and what tool to use. And then what you might be expecting of your audience. So, if you need to ask everybody to make sure they're muted when they come into the meeting, or if they've been muted, tell them like your audio or your video are muted and please don't unmute unless asked to, or Or, if it's a more casual meeting, just unmute whenever you need to say something. Just setting those expectations for the audience. Um, Actively engaging using the emojis, or Q&A or chat, making sure that you're telling people how you want them to participate during the meeting. And then, asking everyone to be on time, practice empathy, and then being aware of what you're sharing around you. So for written communication, what the protocol is, do you want, again, to call, chat? What are the expectations for the team for you? Set your status, be consistent with naming, using things like @mention to get people's attention, and then work on keeping the spaces clean. So wherever the team spaces, where folders and files are, making sure that it's staying up to date, it's clean, that you're archiving old stuff, you're deleting stuff that's not needed, you're using the retention policies appropriately when it applies to certain documents. And talk about, if you're using things like emojis and GIFs, things can mean different things to different generations. So, just if talking to your team about those things is important as well. File storage and sharing, have a clear naming structure. So making sure you're organizing your folders with the name, the date, project, department, category, whatever is appropriate, but have a consistent naming structure for your folders, your documents, making sure that you're using, the year, month, day, project, and task, and just applying that consistently across all the documents. Making sure if it's in the project team, then you're able to share that within the project, with all those members. But if you need to share it outside of that, you're giving those sharing privileges and then revoking them. The best way to do that is share via a link and not sending the file itself, because then you can control the privacy, and who has access. So making sure you're always following those guidelines and choosing the appropriate home for your files. And that is everything I had put together for wellness and well-being. But I would love to talk more about people's experiences, and if you all want to share some stories or ask some questions.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, this is a time for anyone to hop in, put anything in chat, maybe raise your hand if you want to share. Let's see if I can get the participant panel up where I can keep an eye on who's who. Perfect. And I can go ahead and give people some time to think about what they might want to say or offer up by, I guess, sharing some feedback on your file folder structure thing. That's a big thing for me. And I have recently started at the launch of every project meeting, talking people through how the team space is organized. I used to not do that because I thought it felt so pedantic when I would say, hey, the project docs go in this folder and the communications go in this folder. But I found that if I take that time to orient people to the team structure, then the files people take ownership of helping to organize that, and we can find things easier. We do have a comment from Allison. Would you mind sharing? Oh, yes. So the presentation will be shared two ways. The video itself will get posted to YouTube, and then the video plus Christina's presentation will get posted to our Connect space. So if you're a member of the project management community group and you've joined our community group on connect.educause.edu, then that will get posted out on Friday, and then I usually inform everyone in the discussion board as soon as I post it. Looking for hands in the participant panel, looking for comments in the chat channel. All right.
And I've got a question, or maybe a topic of conversation. I know a lot of us are working in a hybrid or an online world. Um, there seems to be some strong feelings about cameras on or cameras off. Like, I don't mind if I'm looking at a black box, but I know a lot of people, a lot of PMs, a lot of managers, they want everyone with their cameras on. Any thoughts on that? Because I know you're pretty much hybrid, right?
Me? Are you talking to me or Christina?
Christina,
Yeah, okay.
or Ed, you're
Yeah.
hybrid as well.
Well, I'm fully remote. I share my video more often in like one-to-one meetings.
Hmm.
Um, especially, I don't know, I just feel like whatever I look like is fine, whatever. Um, but in our, it's like 50-50, I think, for me. Maybe sometimes I unmute if I'm talking in a bigger group meeting. And then we've had other meetings where my manager said, I want everybody's camera on for this one meeting because there's people whose face we haven't seen in 3 years or more.
Hmm.
So, you know, we occasionally do that. I try sometimes, but I don't really push it. It's based on what everyone's comfort level is. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ed, you're fully remote as well.
Yeah, so our campus has recently had a push, verbal push, if you will, to have cameras on during meetings. And of course, being a remote employee, I am sensitive to the fact that I'd like to stay remote. So I completely comply with that wherever I can. My camera's on. I'm always dressed camera ready. I was before the camera order because as a project manager, you never know when you're gonna have a meeting. So I'm always sporting a shirt with a collar at least. So not a big deal. I will say, before the pandemic, how many phone calls did I have with vendors and such over that thing they used to call a phone, and I never got to see what they look like. And we conducted lots of business that way. But again, I see the value in having the cameras on because you get to see people. Half the time I'm not looking at the cameras though, because I'm taking the notes. I'm in the project plans. I'm doing all the things that PMs do. Yeah, and there's a couple of comments in there.
Well, Sandy has her hand up also.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Sandy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I guess I just wanted to, I am the project director on a relatively new and very small team. And the challenge that I find is like getting our sort of end users and people to like think about what they want. Like we've tried like and like we're work in progress, totally understand. And like we've designed a business requirements document that we sort of bring to initial meetings. And it just, I don't know, I find it to be a challenge to sort of just deal with like then every subsequent meeting, there's like, oh, one more thing, and oh, we forgot that we really need this, and oh, this. Like, do you have any tips for sort of either A, prepping well enough so that that gets minimized, or just sort of how to deal with it as it comes up?
I'm gonna leave that to some of our more experienced project managers here. So John, Ed, Carol, Jen.
Was the question about minimizing comments after a meeting? Was it more about, I was trying to follow the question. Do you
Yeah,
mind?
it was just more about sort of not are the people that we work with who are just sort of internal, like in our own office. Like we don't usually deal with vendors or like very external people, but like, for example, like we work with the admissions and aid team. And it can be hard to either A, capture their attention. And so when we work with them to develop business requirements for a project, they just can't manage to do it all in one or two or five meetings. It's just things always come up about like, oh, I forgot that we actually really need this, and like, oh, right, we have this list of fellowships that's like super important to maintain, halfway through a project. And so like, how do we how do we prep well enough to try and suss those questions out at the beginning, or how do we deal with it along the way?
And you're documenting those requirements, right, in front of
Yes.
them?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sandy, one of the things we talked about, I work in a very functional organization right now. So what you described, that's why, it's almost an everyday occurrence. And it was fascinating because we actually just had a team offsite a couple of weeks ago here for the 40 people in my department. And our kind of external advisor who was giving us our topic, which was around design thinking, was using tools like that to help identify not just the solutions, but are we looking at the right problems in that?
Yeah.
And one of the things he said, which warmed my heart, was that remembering an old term that I used in my consulting days, which is, if it costs $1 in early planning, it costs $2 in design, costs $4 during build, $8 during test, and 16 when we go live.
Yeah.
Like just understanding that for folks. And I think that's where, we, as much as we live in sort of a waterfall world, that's when I kind of use the agile of, well, we'll just add, can we just add that to the backlog? Is it really necessary right now?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we tease those out? And it's a constant, no silver bullet, but it's just using those things to try to open those brainstorms and draw pictures, was the other thing that we leaned on, which were, it doesn't have to be fancy, but a prototype a quick prototype, whether it's hand drawn or something in a solution to give people something visual to look at, can help with that. Otherwise, we lean into what I put in the chat.
That was
walk
that's my
out
third
walk out of the
option.
room and I'm like stabbing a voodoo doll with
Like, please don't say that while we're being recorded, John, but you just did. So there you go. It's all good.
with a
We said
smile
worse.
on my face for the recording of the AI. That was a joke.
And Sandy, I think there needs to be some level of formality and
Mhm.
closure to your requirements gathering, because that's what we use to develop scope documents. That's how we plan. And if your group is going to change things along the way, well, that's just scope creep.
Yeah.
And that belongs in a backlog or a dot, 1.5. But it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. We're a very small shop. So it sometimes adding a level of formality feels not right, just for the culture of our office. But
Mhm.
yes, design thinking, scope documents, all like good. Thank you. All good things.
There was
couple more minutes.
a
Go ahead.
question in there about icebreakers. There was a great agile book. I'll have to go back and find it it was just like all like activities and things that you can use. It was really helpful. So I'll try and find it and give you that for the meeting notes. But also there was a really fun activity, like icebreaker kind of activity I did to start a retrospective meeting. And it was if there was a movie or a song that could describe how you felt the project has gone to this point. And there were some very fun answers, things like Groundhog Day or Thank You Next. There were just some really creative responses. So things like that where it's not a little bit of a normal icebreaker, but with a twist or fun.
A twist on that, it's more of a team builder that I've done is with the team. I've asked for their favorite song that they'd want to play if they were like a keynote presenter. You know how in keynotes they walk on stage, they play this really awesome soundtrack, and the person walks out there, and it's just they just get that energy. So what would that song be for them? And I compiled that list, put it in a playlist on Spotify for them to listen to later.
I've got a thought here. I picked up some great information here, some of the things I really like. And I really like the idea of walking people through how to get the documents, or maybe that was Christina. Had never thought about that. But I was thinking about what Sandy said, and something I've only done, I think, once in any project, and that's to explain the change process during a kickoff meeting, and to put that out there and just say, hey, you know what, if we have a change to requirements, there's a formal process. And I see your point, Sandy. You don't want that overhead. You don't want it to be too formal, but also you need to get it approved because it could extend the timeline. It could extend the resource commitments and those kind of things. So really making sure everybody understands that piece, I think, is kind of important.
I struggle with that because when I'm teaching people how to access where the files are, like I said, I feel such like a K-12 teacher, being a former K-12 teacher. And I don't like to treat people on the project team that way, but it ends up helping out.
And I'm gonna throw the public view link for the slides in the chat too. So then you can grab that for the the recap.
Oh, cool. I will grab that right now.
Kristen, I just wanted to say I got in on the meeting partly way because I had a conflicting meeting, but what I saw was great, awesome. I can't wait to watch the whole thing. So good stuff from what I did see. So appreciate it.
You appreciate that.
All right, so there's no other questions. Looking at the participant panel, don't see any other hands raised, nothing in chat. I think we'll move on to announcements. Let me get that back up here. All right, I'm gonna take over now. So just promoting this new feature, if you will. You want to call it a feature. It's our podcast recommendations. People are asking for resources, what podcasts we listen to. So I will post the link to this in the chat. Bear with me for a second. You guys get to watch me do that. How cool is that? I'm supposed to pop up on the other window. So this is nothing fancy. It's just a Google Doc listing podcast recommendations by the steering committee and some of you. So feel free to add to this. It's very simple. If you've got a favorite podcast, all we're asking for is the name and then the link to that podcast. And it's a great resource to learn, to continue to do professional development. Moving on to the next slide. This is what our program looks like for the rest of the year. We are excited about our April session coming up. We're going to do something on IT capacity management. There's a couple people in the project management community group that have offered to be part of the panel. So we'll start working on pulling that panel together and getting a little bit of organization around that, and hopefully have a great presentation and our panel discussion in April. Looking forward to that. May is our coffee talk. And then we've got an open session in June, and that could be a presentation by anyone out there that's listening to the sound of my voice. So you don't have to make this a conference grade presentation. A lot of people get intimidated by that. This is a good place to cut your teeth, or if you've got something that you're passionate about and you really want to share with the rest of the community group, this is your opportunity to do so. So if you're interested, just reach out to the steering committee. You can do that just by putting something out there on the project management community group discussion board, and just reach out to one of us individually, and we can talk about your presentation. Encourage everyone to consider that.
And Ed is a little plug to promote that. It's also great for your self evals when you guys have to do evaluations.
Absolutely. And so this is me following Christina's point in her presentation. This is me encouraging you to think about what you'd want to present to us. So here you go. And I do want to promote the YouTube channel. If you are a member of Project Management Community Group, then you receive the discussion posts that let you know that there are the video has been posted. If not, let's see here, I've got the, if I could do this. This is our YouTube channel, and we've got lots of awesome videos that we posted there over the span of time, including project prioritization. This is our attempt to, I'm featuring this one because this is our attempt to do clickbait, and then we abandoned the clickbait idea. Proved us no good. But there's other interesting presentations out there. The Waterfall Agile and Lean OMI is a really awesome presentation. A couple others, Com Hackers is a good one as well, since Christina talked about communications. You just can't go wrong. There's a lot of good stuff out there. So feel free to check out our YouTube channel. I should post that link in the chat before I forget.
And then there's a question about, is the Educause conference accredited for PMI and PDUs?
Ooh. Yes, it is, but it won't recognize us. So when you go into the PMI website to enter your PDUs, I have to go in and just type in everything manual. There's no code to provide. We're not officially sanctioned by the PMI Institute, but they do count. They've approved everyone that I've submitted.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've used them for years. I've never had an issue. It's usually self-directed learning conference.
Yeah.
If you're speaking or doing a conference topic, the same thing you would for giving to the community.
And if you are going to present, you could count the preparation time for the presentation as well, because you're preparing content. All righty, folks. Well, with that, I'm going to bid everyone adieu because I just like saying that word. And wish you guys all the best for the rest of the week. You guys take care. Make it a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.